Hey guys, welcome back to the doremicom channel. I had the opportunity to work with Warmongergameday.com, and they have lined up an opportunity for me to speak with David Carl, the development manager and playtest coordinator for Privateer Press. He's here to chat with us and answer some questions surrounding the recent release of Hordes Mark II. David, thank you for being here.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me on the show.
First question I got for you. When War Machine and Hordes was first brought to market, Privateer Press won quite a few awards. Can you review with us the origins of the rules, how long it took to develop the initial concept, and how the tactical game ties to the Iron Kingdom's role-playing game?
Well, this was all going back a little bit before my time, but Privateer Press as a whole started almost 10 years ago now, and started with the role-playing game supplement, the Witchfire trilogy. And that was a series of 3 adventure books for the D20 system, role-playing game, and received quite a few awards at the time for the storytelling as well as the game setting that was created around this story that they were telling there, and as well as giving this environment, this setting to the players within the RPG experience. They quickly started making models for it as well and selling those models, and said, hey, let's make a game out of this and give players the opportunity to experience it in the form of a miniatures combat game as well as an RPG world. So there was a limited release with kind of the early rules for just the basic battle boxes of the game back in about 2002, and then the full public release of War Machine was in 2003. And that's the time period where I got involved. I was immediately attracted to the game mechanics of the game and the setting, and I actually found the miniatures game before I found the role-playing game. But after that, I also got into the role-playing game experience and soon got on board with Privateer Press as one of their volunteers and one of their play testers. And a couple of years later, in 2005, they released Hordes, which was the feral twin to War Machine. War Machine focuses on the warcasters, the powerful wizards who control mighty robots that are magic and steam powered, and Hordes focuses on warlocks, these shamans who control wild beasts and have their own unique perspective and their unique methods of combat within the world. The two games are slightly different in terms of the exact nature of the rules, but they're also completely compatible. So you can play a warcaster and his warjacks right up against a warlock and their warbeasts. Since then, more and more releases for both War Machine and Hordes. And then this year, here in 2010, we've released all of the Mark II books for War Machine and Hordes, kind of resetting some of the rules in terms of making things a little bit clearer, a little bit more streamlined. The company's learned a lot over 7 or 8 years of having these games, kind of just getting the ball rolling and then adding more to it. And now we've got a good feel for creating a solid foundation for the game for many years to come.
So you made mention of the fact that the first Hordes book came out in 2005, and here it is 2010. I'm thinking that it wasn't a full 5 years that the Mark II rules were in development, but about how long did it take for the Hordes Mark II rules to be released? I mean, how much time in development?
Well, that's a good question, because we knew between War Machine and Hordes, and with trying to continue releasing new models as well, one thing to just kind of throw in here is during this same time period of working on Mark II, we were also working on a whole new faction. The Retribution of Syra is a group of elven nationals from the land of Ios, and they have their own unique style of combat and their own warjacks called Myrmidons. And that faction was released in 2009, before Mark II even was fully and officially released, within the Mark II rule system. So they were the first brand new faction for War Machine, and also the first Mark II faction at the same time. So during all of 2009, and even going back a little bit into mid to late 2008, we were already starting to look into and work on the foundation of Mark II. One of the problems, though, is that we've had this 8 years worth of development to pack into just a single year, basically, or maybe a year and a half. And the only way to do that, and to do it well, in our opinion, was to bring on the players as additional playtest support, and we did that through means of the public field test. We gave players a snapshot view of where models stood at the time, and then invited their input on where they felt the faction balance lied, and things that could be made clearer in the rules, smoother in terms of interactions. And in doing so, we were able to get a greater volume of playtest feedback and use that to try and make as robust of a rule set as possible, and then release that over the course of this 2010 year.
So how does Privateer Press decide, we notice we have this product out and it's time to make a new rule set. So for instance, what was there something that happened where Privateer Press as a company said it's time to do another Hordes rule update?
Well, there wasn't one specific event or specific element of feedback or interaction that said, hey, it's time. But it's one of those things where the developers of the game and the owner of the company, just Privateer as a whole, has just learned a lot over the years and decided, this is the time that we should take a step back for a minute, and in order for the game to continue moving forward at the pace we want, just kind of reinitialize everything, straighten out any of the rules questions that we've got going on, streamline some of these interactions that are causing confusion among players, especially as we've grown more and more into foreign markets, where for many players the first language isn't English. And having that rules clarity is just critical to maintaining a strong player base and strong understanding of the game.
What, in your take, is the most significant change that we'll see in the new Hordes Mark II rule set?
Well, I think that one of the major elements of Mark II that a lot of players were clamoring for before the change took place was kind of to take a new spin, put a new focus on the interaction between the Warjacks and the Warbeasts. Warjacks for War Machine, and then the Warbeasts for Hordes. In the case of War Machine, the Warjacks got a bit tougher to kill, for one thing, and also got the attrition value of as they started getting damaged is less severe than it was in Mark I. So instead of having this giant magical robot out there, takes a few hits and suddenly it's no longer doing its job very well, it can stay in the fight longer and be more effective longer with the tweaks to the rules for how Warjack systems worked, and then also the tweaks to the rules of how much damage it really takes to destroy a Warjack. On the Warbeast side of things, for Hordes Mark II, we took a similar look at the Warbeasts. Warjacks and Warbeasts alike got a few stat bonuses here and there, but more importantly on the core rules side, Warbeasts now have an easier interaction with when they frenzy. A frenzy is when a Warbeast is no longer under its Warlock control because you've tried to do too much with that Warbeast. It's got too much Fury points, which are kind of the resource of these Warbeasts on that beast. It will go crazy and it will start attacking your own army. In the Mark I rule set, once that happened, it continued to create a resource burden on the Warlock, which made it harder to bring your army back under control and get back into the action. Now in Mark II, just like the Warjacks now have this improved staying power to stay in the game longer, the Warbeasts have a way to get back into the fight faster after they frenzy. Once they go crazy, you reset their fury count, and then from there on, they've mangled the one target they've gone after, but they're back under the Warlock's control, and he can send them out to do battle once again.
You made mention of this before, and I've noticed this, that Privateer Press seems to be very consistent with releasing rules early to be play-tested by their significantly large player community. Has there been a lot of feedback with this strategy for the Mark II rule set? And if so, what user community change most significantly impacted the Horde's Mark II rule set?
Well, I do want to point out that we do not always do a public testing. There was some degree of public testing before the full release of War Machine Mark I back in 2003. And then we also did this public testing before releasing the Mark II books. But when it comes to just an expansion book, when it's not like a brand new system, we stick to our internal play testers here at Privateer Press, and then groups of external play testers drawn from quality players around the world. When we're doing a normal development cycle on a usual schedule, a measured pace, we can use that system that we know well and can work with well. But when it comes to really doing something that's a big leap forward, that's where we draw in the broader community. That's where we drew in the field test participants for Hordes and for War Machine Mark II. And if we had any similar big leaps forward in development, we would consider doing a broader public view of that development work to get that extra volume of feedback. Between War Machine and Hordes for the Mark II field tests, we had roughly 20,000 reports from players around the world giving their feedback on things they liked, things they didn't like, things that could change. And it was a great volume of information there to sort through and to find which elements really had a lot of good feedback behind it and other things that might have been more just player preference.
Compatibility between Hordes and War Machine is a significant staple in the Privateer Press line of tabletop gaming. In Mark II, what is the most significant difference a War Machine player should know when matched up against a Hordes player, or vice versa?
Well, this is a matter of much debate on our forums, as well as among other players looking in on the games of War Machine and Hordes. There are people who say that one system is better than the other, or vice versa. I've got very clear and very strongly worded emails or PMs or phone calls that for such and such a reason, one is clearly better. But that doesn't hold up. In our tournaments, we allow both games, and we see consistently players from War Machine and players from Hordes in the Mark II environment battling it out right at the very top for championship position there. So I don't think that we can consider it a true thing that these are no longer balanced games, because they absolutely are. The biggest difference between the two is kind of that interaction between the Warcaster and the Warjacks versus the Warlock and the Warbeasts. A Warcaster and Warjacks, which defines kind of that War Machine overall interaction, is often described as being a resource management system. Your Warcaster has a very measured quantity of resources available, whether they've got one Warjack or 8 or even no Warjacks at all if they've all been destroyed. They've got that measured pace of how much resources is available in a given turn. And that's both a strength in that you can rely upon that quantity of resources every turn, and a weakness in that you will not ever get more than that to use. Now, Hordes, on the other hand, with the Warlock and Warbeast mechanic, is described as a risk management system rather than a resource management system. At the beginning of the game, a Hordes player is going to be able to push his battle group a lot harder than a War Machine player can, and be able to generate lots of fury, be able to do a lot more with the beasts in the same amount of time. But that has a couple of drawbacks of its own. For one thing, the Warbeasts can frenzy, as we talked about, where they go crazy and go after just whatever's nearest instead of what the player wants them to, as well as the possibility that as Warbeasts start dying off, the Warlock no longer has those resources to rely on. Those fury points that should be generated by the beasts, eventually there might be nobody left to generate them. And so you have kind of this steady pace of what War Machine has in terms of its resources, which you can't really raise or lower. It's just that's what you get. and you're managing that limited resource as best you can against kind of that ebb and flow of hordes where you can push a ton of resources all at once, but then after that you're kind of on that downslope. And so if the War Machine player can kind of outlast that resource burst of the Hordes player, they'll be able to gain an edge, where on the flip side of things, if the Hordes player is able to use that burst of energy to gain a distinct advantage over their opponent, the Hordes player will have an edge. So it's really about play style, personal preference, the way your army is built, the way you use the tactics and the maneuvering to your advantage. But I truly believe that the two games as a whole have a really good balance between one of another, even though they have this difference in how games play out.
On the Privateer Press website, information has been released on new plastic battle groups. Will we be seeing plastic war packs coming out as well?
Yes, the War Machine plastic battle groups are out already. The Hordes plastic war packs will be out sometime in the future. Being in development, I don't have much information on the production side of things, but I know that there are plans at some point to be able to release those as well.
And is there a way for new players to know if their war pack purchase will contain the Mark II cards?
Well, all of the war packs that we've sent out since the transition do have the Mark II cards in them. But if someone happens to get a product with the older cards still in it, maybe it was still on the shelf at the game store or something like that, game store owners have the ability to get replacement cards from Privateer Press. They're sold in a whole pack so that anytime somebody gets something and it's like, hey, this has the older cards, your store owner should have newer cards readily available. They can just swap them out for you. If, for some reason, maybe they didn't order that replacement card pack, or if they have run out of a particular card, you can still email Privateer Press. The address is frontdesk@privateerpress.com, with front desk, all one word, no underscores or anything like that. And our customer service guy will send you the replacement cards that you need.
We'll be sure to post that in the video so you guys can, and in the description area, just in case you run into that issue. David, thank you so much for taking the time out to come talk with Warmongergameday.com and the doremicom channel. Greatly appreciate the time.
Well, I hope that it was informative, and I'll be happy to see you guys some other time and chat about some more War Machine and Hordes in the future.
Appreciate it. And guys, this is the conclusion of the interview. Have a good one. Take care.